Good evening, and welcome to The Gentle Scientist. Tonight, we drift into the inner landscape of the human mind, that invisible world where thoughts arise, emotions shift like weather, and the sense of being you emerges moment by moment. This is the realm of psychology, the science of consciousness and behavior, of memory and perception, of connection and solitude. It is the study of what it means to be human, explored through careful observation, through experiment and insight, through the patient work of understanding the most complex system we know, the mind examining itself. Long before psychology became a science, people wondered about the nature of thought and feeling. Ancient philosophers pondered the relationship between body and soul, between reason and emotion. But only in recent centuries have we begun to map the terrain systematically, to discover the hidden processes that shape experience, the unconscious influences that guide behavior, the neural mechanisms that give rise to the felt quality of being alive and aware. What we have learned is both humbling and wondrous. The mind is not what it seems. Memory is not a faithful record, but a creative reconstruction. Perception is not a window on reality, but a construction built from fragmentary data. The unified self you feel yourself to be is woven together from multiple processes, a narrative your brain tells itself to create continuity. Emotions arise before conscious thought, shaping judgment in ways you rarely notice. Social forces mold behavior more powerfully than individual will. And through it all, the brain changes constantly, reshaping itself in response to experience, never finished, never fixed. These discoveries reveal the mind as something stranger and more beautiful than our intuitions suggest. You are not a simple, rational agent consciously directing your life. You are a collaboration between conscious and unconscious systems, between ancient emotional circuits and recent cognitive innovations, between individual psychology and social influence. Understanding this complexity does not diminish you, but deepens appreciation for the intricate architecture that allows you to navigate the world, to connect with others, to remember the past and imagine the future, to experience meaning and beauty and love. Tonight, as you rest, we will explore this inner landscape together. Each discovery is an invitation to see yourself with fresh eyes, to recognize the hidden processes that shape every moment, to appreciate the remarkable system that is you. If you enjoy these quiet journeys into the mysteries of mind and nature, I invite you to like the video, subscribe to The Gentle Scientist, or share a thought in the comments below. It helps others find their way here too. Curious minds seeking understanding in the gentle hours before sleep. For now, just breathe. Let your body settle into comfort. Let your thoughts begin to slow and soften. Let the day's concerns fade into the background, and let us begin this exploration together, drifting through the fascinating terrain of psychology, where every discovery illuminates what it means to be human, to be conscious, to be you. Memory feels like a library within us, a place where moments are stored on shelves, waiting to be retrieved exactly as they happened. But this feeling comforting as it is an illusion. Memory is not a recording. It is not a photograph tucked away in a drawer. It is something far more beautiful and strange. Memory is a reconstruction, built anew each time we remember, shaped by who we are in the present moment, as much as by what happened in the past. Every time you recall a memory, your brain does not simply play back a stored file. Instead, it gathers fragments scattered across different regions, weaving them together into something that feels whole. The hippocampus, a small curved structure deep within your brain, acts as the conductor of this orchestra. It binds together sights, sounds, emotions, and sensations that were encoded in different areas when the experience first occurred. When you remember your childhood home, the visual details come from your visual cortex, the feeling of warmth from sensory regions, the emotion from your amygdala. The hippocampus calls them all forward and assembles them into a moment that feels real. But here is where memory becomes mysterious. Each time this reconstruction happens, the memory changes slightly. Like a story told and retold, it shifts with each telling. Details fade or brighten. Emotions intensify or soften. New information from the present can weave itself into memories of the past without you noticing. Scientists have demonstrated this in laboratories, showing people videos and then asking about them weeks later with subtle suggestions embedded in the questions. The suggestions become part of the memory itself, indistinguishable from what actually happened. We do not lie when we remember incorrectly. We simply remember the last version we reconstructed, which may have drifted from the original, like a ship slowly pulled by invisible currents. This reconstructive nature of memory serves us. If memory were perfect and unchanging, we would be prisoners of the past, unable to update our understanding as we learn and grow. Instead, memory is flexible, allowing us to extract meaning, find patterns, and apply old lessons to new situations. But this flexibility comes with a cost. We can be certain of memories that never happened. We can forget moments that shaped us. We carry within us a personal history that is part truth, part interpretation, part invention. The journey from experience to memory happens in stages. When something first occurs, it enters what scientists call working memory, a temporary holding space that lasts only seconds. This is the mental workspace where you hold a phone number just long enough to dial it, or keep track of what someone is saying as they speak. Working memory is limited, able to hold only a handful of items at once. Most of what enters here fades immediately, like writing in sand washed away by waves. For a memory to last longer, it must be encoded into long-term storage through a process called consolidation. This is where the hippocampus becomes essential. Over hours and days, the hippocampus replays the experience, sending signals back and forth between different brain regions, gradually strengthening the connections until the memory can exist independently. Sleep plays a profound role in this process. During deep sleep, your brain replays the day's experiences in fast forward, deciding what to keep and what to discard. The memories you consolidate during sleep become woven into the fabric of who you are. Some memories consolidate more easily than others. Emotional experiences are encoded more deeply, which is why you remember your first day of school or a moment of heartbreak with such clarity, while hundreds of ordinary afternoons have vanished completely. The amygdala, your brain's emotional center, tags certain experiences as important, releasing chemicals that tell the hippocampus to pay attention. This is why memories tied to strong emotions, whether joy or fear or wonder, tend to remain vivid for years. There is a phenomenon psychologists call flashbulb memories, moments so striking that we remember not just the event, but where we were, who we were with, even what we were wearing. People often recall exactly where they were when they heard shocking news or experienced something extraordinary. These memories feel photographically clear, and for decades, researchers believed they were more accurate than ordinary memories. But studies have shown that flashbulb memories are just as prone to distortion as any other. They feel more real because of their emotional weight, but they change over time like all memories do, even as we remain convinced of their accuracy. Childhood memories occupy a strange territory. Most people cannot remember anything from before the age of 3 or 4, a phenomenon called childhood amnesia. The hippocampus is still developing during those early years, not yet capable of forming the lasting connections that create retrievable memories. The experiences happened, shaped your developing brain, influenced who you became, but they did not consolidate into conscious memories you can access. The few memories that do survive from early childhood are often reconstructions built from photographs, family stories, and imagination, feeling real because they have been rehearsed so many times. As we age, memory follows a particular pattern called the forgetting curve. Most forgetting happens quickly. Within hours of learning something new, half of the details may already be gone. But what remains becomes more stable over time. This is why reviewing information soon after learning it, then again after a delay, helps it stick. The spacing effect shows that distributed practice over time creates stronger memories than cramming everything at once. Your brain needs time to consolidate, to sleep on it, to weave new information into existing knowledge. And then there is the power of smell. Of all your senses, smell has the most direct route to memory and emotion. Olfactory information travels straight to the limbic system, bypassing the thalamus that processes other senses. A particular scent can transport you instantly to a moment decades past, more vividly than any photograph could. The smell of rain on hot pavement, of a specific perfume, of bread baking, these can unlock entire worlds of memory with startling emotional force. Scientists call this the Proustian effect, named for the French writer who wrote eloquently about how the taste of a Madeleine cookie flooded him with memories of childhood. Throughout history, people have developed techniques to strengthen memory. The ancient Greeks created memory palaces, imagining elaborate buildings and placing items to remember in specific locations within them. By mentally walking through these spaces, they could recall vast amounts of information in order. This method works because our spatial memory is exceptionally strong. We evolved to remember landscapes, to navigate, to find our way home. By linking abstract information to spatial locations, we tap into this ancient system. Memory is not one thing, but many systems working together. Procedural memory allows you to ride a bicycle or type on a keyboard without conscious thought. Semantic memory holds facts and concepts, the knowledge that Paris is in France, or that water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius. Episodic memory contains your personal experiences, the episodes of your life that make you who you are. These systems can operate independently. Someone with amnesia might forget their entire past, but still remember how to play piano, their fingers moving through familiar patterns even as they cannot recall ever learning. What we remember and what we forget shape our identity more than we realize. Your life story is not a complete record, but a selective narrative built from the memories that survived, that were rehearsed, that seemed important enough to keep. And this story changes as you do. Remembering something in light of new understanding can alter how you remember it next time. The past is not fixed behind you, but is constantly being rewritten by the present. As you lie here now, your brain is already beginning the work of consolidation. The information you have taken in today, the experiences you had, the thoughts you entertained, all of these are being sorted, evaluated, and either strengthened into lasting memories or allowed to fade. Your sleeping brain will decide what matters, what connects to what you already know, what serves you going forward. And within these memories, constantly reconstructed, your sense of self begins to form. But what exactly is this self? This feeling of being a unified I that persists from moment to moment, year to year? The answer, revealed through decades of psychological and neuroscientific research, is both fascinating and unsettling. The self is not the solid, singular entity it feels like. It is a construction, an ongoing process, a story your brain tells itself to create the illusion of continuity. Consciousness itself is one of the deepest mysteries in all of science. You are reading these words right now, aware that you are aware, experiencing the strange phenomenon of being someone who experiences. This quality of subjective experience, what philosophers call qualia, emerges somehow from the electrical and chemical activity of billions of neurons. How mere matter generates the felt sense of being is something we still cannot fully explain. But what we do know is that consciousness is not a single spotlight illuminating your inner world. It is more like a shifting coalition of processes, different systems taking turns, sometimes cooperating, sometimes competing for control. Your brain is divided into two hemispheres, left and right, connected by a thick bundle of nerve fibers called the corpus callosum. For most people, these hemispheres work together so seamlessly that you never notice the division. But in the middle of the 20th century, neurosurgeons began severing the corpus callosum in patients with severe epilepsy, preventing seizures from spreading between hemispheres. These split-brain patients revealed something extraordinary about the nature of consciousness and self. When researchers showed images to only one hemisphere, they discovered that each half of the brain seemed to have its own awareness, its own preferences, sometimes even its own intentions. If a word was flashed to the right hemisphere, which controls the left hand and has limited language, the patient could not say what they saw. The left hemisphere, which handles speech, genuinely did not know. But the left hand could point to the matching object. Each hemisphere was processing information independently, yet the patient felt like a single person. Even more remarkably, when the hemispheres disagreed, the left hemisphere, the speaking one, would create explanations for behaviors initiated by the right. One patient's left hand would reach for one outfit while the right hand reached for another. When asked why, the patient would confabulate a reasonable sounding story, completely unaware that the conflict arose from two separate centers of intention. The left hemisphere, it seems, acts as an interpreter, constantly generating narratives to explain our behavior, even when it does not actually know why we do what we do. This interpreter function operates in all of us, not just split-brain patients. Much of what drives your behavior arises from processes outside conscious awareness, but your conscious mind creates stories about why you did what you did, stories that feel true, but may be entirely constructed after the fact. You reach for a snack and tell yourself you were hungry. You choose one product over another and convince yourself it was because of superior quality. But often, these explanations are narratives imposed on actions driven by unconscious impulses, emotions, or random fluctuations in brain states. The unified self you experience is, in a sense, a user interface. Just as your computer's desktop hides the complexity of millions of processes running beneath, your sense of self is a simplified representation that allows you to function without being overwhelmed by the brain's underlying complexity. You do not experience the countless neural systems constantly active within you. You experience a simplified you that seems to be in charge, making decisions, navigating the world. But this you is context dependent. You have noticed, perhaps, that you are slightly different people in different situations. The self you are with your family differs from the self you are with colleagues, which differs from the self you are alone. These are not masks hiding a true self. They are all genuine expressions of the multifaceted system that is you. Personality psychologists have found that behavior varies more across situations than most people realize. The person who is bold and talkative at work might be quiet and reserved at a family gathering. Both are real. Beneath conscious awareness, different neural networks activate in different contexts, bringing different memories, goals, and behavioral patterns to the foreground. Some researchers propose that we are better understood as a collection of subpersonalities or modes, each adapted to different social and environmental contexts. The self that emerges in any moment depends on which networks are currently dominant, which goals are active, which memories are accessible. This flexibility serves an important purpose. A completely rigid self would not adapt well to the varied demands of life. You need different skills, different emotional tones, different ways of thinking for different situations. The ability to shift between modes allows you to navigate a complex social world. But it also means that the continuous, unchanging self we feel we are is partly an illusion, a narrative thread stitched through a patchwork of different states. When you are not engaged in a specific task, when your mind wanders, a particular network of brain regions becomes active. Neuroscientists call this the default mode network. It activates when you daydream, when you think about yourself, when you imagine the future or remember the past, when you consider what others might be thinking. This network seems to be involved in constructing your sense of self across time, linking past and future into a coherent narrative with you as the protagonist. Interestingly, meditation practices that emphasize present moment awareness, that quiet the narrative mind, show decreased activity in the default mode network. Experienced meditators report a loosening of the sense of self, a feeling of boundaries dissolving. This is not pathological, but reveals how much the self is an active construction. When the construction stops, the sense of a separate, solid self can fade, replaced by a more expansive awareness. The development of self-awareness follows a predictable path in children. Around 18 months of age, something remarkable happens. A child who sees themselves in a mirror will reach up to touch a mark on their own face rather than reaching toward the mirror. This is called the mirror test, and passing it indicates self-recognition and understanding that the reflection is oneself. Before this age, children treat mirror images as interesting other beings. After, they grasp that they are seeing themselves, a crucial step in developing a sense of being a separate individual. This recognition of self as separate from others relies on something called mirror neurons. These specialized cells fire both when you perform an action and when you watch someone else perform the same action. If you see someone pick up a cup, the same neurons activate as when you pick up a cup yourself. This neural mirroring forms the basis of imitation, learning, and empathy. It allows you to understand others by simulating their actions and intentions in your own brain. You know what they are doing because your brain is partially doing it too. Mirror neurons help explain why emotions are contagious, why watching someone in pain activates your own pain networks, why a smile tends to elicit a smile in return. Your brain blurs the boundary between self and other at a neural level. You are constantly, unconsciously simulating the people around you, which is how you intuitively understand their intentions and feelings. The self is not an isolated island, but a permeable system constantly influenced by the social world. Yet despite all this evidence that the self is fluid, multiple, and constructed, the feeling of being a unified agent persists. This is sometimes called the binding problem. How do all these separate processes, happening in different brain regions at different times, come together to create the seamless experience of being one person, having one experience? We still do not have a complete answer. Somehow, the brain integrates information across regions, synchronizing neural activity to create coherent moments of awareness. Some neuroscientists propose that consciousness arises from particular patterns of oscillation in brain activity, with different regions temporarily synchronizing to create unified percepts. Others suggest that specific brain regions act as coordination hubs. Still others argue that consciousness is not located in any particular place, but emerges from the pattern of information flow across the whole system. The truth may involve all of these and more. What is clear is that damage to specific brain regions can fragment the sense of self in revealing ways. Patients with damage to the right parietal cortex sometimes experience hemispatial neglect, ignoring the entire left side of space and even denying that their left arm belongs to them. Damage to frontal regions can lead to dramatic personality changes as happened to Phineas Gage, the railroad worker whose personality transformed after an iron rod passed through his frontal lobe. Certain types of epileptic seizures can create feelings of depersonalization, a sense of watching oneself from outside, or derealization, a sense that the world is not quite real. These cases reveal that the unified self depends on specific neural systems working correctly. When those systems are disrupted, the carefully constructed illusion can fracture, showing the seams in consciousness. Yet even in healthy brains, careful attention reveals inconsistencies. You can hold contradictory beliefs, desire and fear the same thing, act against your stated values. The unified narrative self explains these contradictions away, but they hint at the multiple systems operating beneath awareness, not always in agreement. If the self is not a fixed entity, but a process, then change is not only possible, but inevitable. You are already becoming different, moment by moment. The you reading this now is not identical to the you who began this sentence. New information has been added. Neural connections have strengthened or weakened. The configuration has shifted slightly. Over longer timescales, the changes compound. The person you were 10 years ago had different memories, different priorities, different patterns of thought. In a very real sense, they were a different person, connected to present you through continuity of body and fragments of memory. This continuous transformation happens so gradually that you do not notice. Like a river that seems the same even as new water flows through it constantly. You remain you, even as everything about you changes. The self is not a thing, but a process, not a noun, but a verb. You are not a static being who experiences life. You are the experiencing itself, constantly arising anew. This fluid self perceives a world that seems solid, immediate, and obviously real. You look around and see a complete scene, rich with color and detail. You hear sounds arriving from precise locations. You feel the texture of fabric against your skin, the temperature of the air, the weight of your body at rest. All of this feels like direct contact with reality, as though your senses are windows that simply let the world in. But this feeling, vivid as it is an illusion. What you perceive is not the world itself, but a construction, a simulation your brain builds from fragmentary sensory data, shaped by expectations, limited by biology, and constantly filled in by educated guesses. Consider your vision, which feels so complete and detailed. You have the impression that you see everything in front of you with equal clarity, that your visual field is a high-resolution panorama. But this is not true. Only a tiny region at the center of your vision, corresponding to the fovea at the back of your eye, actually sees in high detail. The rest of your visual field is surprisingly blurry, lacking in color, filled in by your brain's predictions about what should be there. You do not notice this because your eyes constantly move in rapid jumps called saccades, bringing different parts of the scene into focus. Your brain stitches these glimpses together into the feeling of seeing everything at once. This stitching process is so seamless that you never notice the gaps. But those gaps are real. During each saccade, your vision is essentially turned off to prevent the blurry smearing of motion. You are functionally blind dozens of times each minute, yet you experience no interruption in visual consciousness. Your brain simply edits out the gaps, creating continuity where none exists. Even your heartbeat creates subtle blind spots in your vision, but these too are filled in automatically, invisibly. Psychologists have demonstrated how limited our awareness truly is through studies of change blindness and inattentional blindness. In change blindness experiments, people watch videos in which significant elements of the scene change between cuts. A person's clothing switches color, an object disappears, sometimes even an entire building is replaced. Most observers, focused on some other aspect of the scene, notice nothing. When shown the changes, they are shocked. How could they miss something so obvious? But the answer is simple. They were not attending to it, and without attention, the change was never registered in conscious awareness. Inattentional blindness is even more dramatic. In the most famous experiment, people watch a video of students passing basketballs and count the number of passes made by players wearing white. Midway through the video, someone in a gorilla costume walks through the scene, stops in the center, beats their chest, and walks off. Roughly half of the observers, concentrating on counting passes, never see the gorilla. When told about it afterward, many refuse to believe it was there until shown the video again. This is not a failure of eyesight, but of attention. The visual information reached their eyes, but without attention, directing processing resources to it, it never entered conscious awareness. These demonstrations reveal something profound about perception. You do not see everything your eyes take in. Consciousness is not a faithful representation of sensory input, but a highly selective summary, determined by what your goals are, what you expect to see, what your past experience has taught you to notice. You see what you are looking for and often miss what you are not. The brain's talent for filling in extends to more basic aspects of vision. Color, for instance, is not a property of the world, but a construction of your visual system. Light itself has no color, only different wavelengths. Your eyes contain 3 types of cone cells, each sensitive to different ranges of wavelengths corresponding roughly to red, green, and blue. The colors you experience arise from your brain's interpretation of the patterns of activation across these 3 receptor types. The rich palette of hues you see is painted by your mind. Different animals with different receptor types experience color differently. Many birds have 4 types of cones and see colors we cannot even imagine. Dogs have only 2 types and experience a more limited range. Mantis shrimp have 16 types of color receptors, though this does not necessarily mean they experience more colors. It may mean they process color information differently. The point is that color is not out there in the world, but is created in the transaction between wavelengths of light and the neural systems that interpret them. Optical illusions exploit the brain's assumptions about how the world works. When you see 2 identical gray squares appear different because one is surrounded by lighter tones and one by darker, your brain is not malfunctioning. It is doing what it always does, interpreting luminance relative to context, correcting for lighting conditions. Under normal circumstances, this produces accurate perception. but carefully constructed illusions can trick these systems into revealing their operation. The way you perceive involves both bottom-up processing and top-down processing. Bottom-up processing moves from sensation to perception, building up complex representations from simple features like edges, colors, and movements. Top-down processing moves in the opposite direction, using knowledge, expectations, and context to interpret sensory input. Both operate simultaneously in constant dialogue. What you perceive is never purely driven by sensory data or purely driven by expectation, but emerges from their interaction. This is why you can read text even when letters are scrambled, as long as the first and last letters are correct. Your knowledge of words and grammar allows you to predict what should be there, and your perception conforms to the prediction. It is why you can understand speech, even in noisy environments, why familiar faces pop out of crowds, why a rustle in the bushes might look like a snake. Your brain is constantly generating hypotheses about what is out there and using sensory data to confirm or revise those hypotheses. Sometimes, sensory information from different modalities influences each other in surprising ways. In the McGurk effect, what you see changes what you hear. If you watch a video of someone saying GA, but the audio is actually ba, you will often hear da, a sound that is neither. Your brain fuses the visual information about lip movements with the auditory information, creating a perception that matches neither input alone. This happens automatically, even when you know about the effect, demonstrating that perception is not something you can simply decide to experience differently. For some people, the boundaries between senses are not as clear as they are for most. Synesthesia is a condition in which stimulation of one sensory pathway automatically triggers experiences in another. Some synesthetes see specific colors when they hear particular sounds or musical notes. Others experience numbers or letters as inherently colored. Still others taste words or feel touch when they see someone else being touched. These cross sensations are consistent over time and seem to arise from unusual connectivity between sensory regions in the brain. Synesthesia reveals that the separation between senses is not absolute, but depends on how the brain is wired. In a sense, all perception involves integration across systems. When you bite into an apple, you experience flavor, but flavor is actually a combination of taste, smell, texture, temperature, and even sound. The crispness you hear contributes to the experience of freshness. People who lose their sense of smell often report that food loses its taste because much of what we call taste is actually olfactory information. Attention acts like a spotlight, illuminating some aspects of the sensory world while leaving others in darkness. But this spotlight is not entirely under your control, no. Certain stimuli automatically capture attention. Movement in your peripheral vision draws your gaze because moving objects might be threats or opportunities. Your own name spoken across a crowded room will often reach your awareness even when you are focused on another conversation, a phenomenon called the cocktail party effect. Emotional stimuli, faces, anything unusual or unexpected, these all have privileged access to attention. What enters your awareness, then, is not a random sample of the world, but a curated selection based on evolutionary priorities, current goals, and learned associations. Two people can stand in the same place and effectively perceive different worlds because their attention highlights different features. A botanist walking through a forest sees species and relationships invisible to others. A musician hears harmonic structures that pass unnoticed. An architect perceives spatial relationships and proportions. Expertise and interest literally change what you perceive. Even the stability of the world around you is an illusion constructed by your brain. Your eyes make several saccadic jumps each second, yet you do not experience the world as jerking around. Your head moves, your body moves, yet the world appears still. This is because your brain uses efference copies, internal predictions of the sensory consequences of your movements, to subtract out the expected changes. When your eyes move, your brain predicts how the visual input should change and stabilizes the perception accordingly. When you press on your eyelid and move your eye manually, the world does appear to move because this motion was not predicted. Your experience of the present moment is also constructed with a slight delay. It takes time for sensory information to be processed, for neural signals to propagate through multiple stages of analysis. What you experience as now is actually a moment that occurred a fraction of a second ago. Your brain hides this delay through prediction and postdiction, creating the illusion of perceiving in real time. When you catch a ball, you are actually catching where your brain predicted it would be, not where it was when you made the decision to close your hand. The brain constructs not just visual reality, but auditory reality as well. Sound localization, your ability to tell where a sound is coming from, relies on tiny differences in timing and intensity between your two ears. A sound coming from the right reaches your right ear slightly earlier and slightly louder than your left. Your brain analyzes these microscopic differences to compute location. In reverberant environments, your auditory system must also separate the original sound from echoes, extracting the signal from acoustic clutter. This happens automatically, outside awareness, allowing you to focus on the message while the mechanics of hearing remain invisible. The sense of touch seems simple and direct, but it too involves extensive processing and construction. Your skin contains many types of receptors sensitive to pressure, vibration, temperature, and pain. But the experience of touching something smooth or rough, hot or cold, emerges from patterns of activation across these receptors, interpreted in the context of movement and expectation. The same neural signal can be experienced as pain or pleasure depending on context. A firm massage can be painful or relieving. The burn of chili peppers activates pain receptors, but is sought out for enjoyment. Even the boundaries of your body are perceptually constructed. In the rubber hand illusion, researchers place a rubber hand in front of you while hiding your real hand. They then stroke both the rubber hand and your hidden real hand simultaneously. After a minute or so, your brain begins to incorporate the rubber hand into your body representation. You feel the touch as coming from the rubber hand, and if someone threatens to strike it, you flinch. The mere coincidence of visual and tactile information is enough to reconfigure your sense of where your body ends and the world begins. All of this reveals that perception is not passive reception, but active construction. Your brain takes ambiguous incomplete sensory data and builds a coherent world, filling gaps, making assumptions, integrating across space and time. This constructed world is usually accurate enough for survival and action. Evolution shaped perception, not for truth, but for utility. You see what you need to see to navigate, to find food, to connect with others, to stay safe. But the constructive nature of perception means it is also malleable, subject to influence and error. Expectations shape what you perceive, which is why people often see what they expect to see and miss what they do not expect. Context matters profoundly. The same sensory input can be perceived differently depending on what surrounds it, what came before it, what you believe about it. Your perceptions are not separate from your knowledge, your emotions, your desires. They are woven together into a single tapestry of experience. Yet, beneath all of this conscious perception, beneath the constructed world you experience, another mind operates in silence. It is vast, tireless, and extraordinarily capable. Most of what your brain does, most of the processing that keeps you alive and functioning, happens entirely outside conscious awareness. The unconscious mind is not a dark repository of repressed desires, as Freud imagined, though such things may exist there too. It is a sophisticated system that perceives, learns, remembers, decides, and acts, all while consciousness remains occupied elsewhere. Consider how much you accomplish without thinking. Right now, as you read these words, your unconscious mind is regulating your heartbeat, managing your breathing, maintaining your body temperature, coordinating the muscles that hold your posture. It is filtering sensory input, deciding what deserves conscious attention and what can be handled automatically. It is keeping you balanced, adjusting to tiny shifts in position without your awareness. All of this complex coordination happens in the background, silent and invisible, allowing consciousness to focus on the narrow task of reading. But the unconscious does far more than maintain basic functions. It makes decisions, forms impressions, guides behavior in ways that profoundly shape your life. Psychologists call this the adaptive unconscious, a system that evolved to make rapid judgments based on pattern recognition and accumulated experience. When you meet someone new and immediately feel you like or distrust them, that feeling arises from unconscious processing of countless subtle cues, facial expressions, body language, tone of voice, resemblance to people from your past. Your conscious mind may not be able to articulate why you feel as you do, but the feeling is real and often predictive. Research on priming demonstrates how deeply unconscious processes influence thought and behavior. In priming experiments, people are briefly exposed to words, images, or concepts, often so quickly they cannot consciously register them. Yet these exposures change subsequent behavior in measurable ways. People primed with words related to old age walk more slowly afterward. Those primed with words related to rudeness interrupt conversations more quickly. Exposure to images of money makes people less helpful and more independent. These effects occur without awareness, without intention, revealing that much of behavior is shaped by influences we never consciously notice. The unconscious mind also holds memories that consciousness cannot access directly. Implicit memories are formed through experience but cannot be verbally recalled. You cannot describe how you balance on a bicycle or the precise sequence of muscle movements required to tie your shoes, yet your body remembers perfectly. This is procedural memory, knowledge embedded in action rather than in words. When you practice a skill, you are training unconscious systems to execute complex sequences automatically, freeing consciousness for higher level strategy and adjustment. Amnesia patients who cannot form new conscious memories can still learn new skills. They improve at tasks with practice, even though they have no memory of practicing. Their unconscious systems are learning, encoding patterns and procedures that guide behavior even in the complete absence of conscious recollection. This reveals a deep truth about memory and learning. Much of what you know, you cannot say. Much of what guides your behavior, you cannot consciously access. The unconscious is especially skilled at pattern recognition. It processes vast amounts of information simultaneously, detecting regularities and relationships that would overwhelm conscious analysis. This is the source of intuition, that feeling of knowing something without knowing how you know. When an experienced firefighter senses danger and orders an evacuation, moments before a floor collapses, they may not be able to explain the decision. But their unconscious mind has detected a pattern, perhaps subtle changes in sound or heat distribution, that matches patterns associated with danger from years of experience. Intuition is not magical, but represents accumulated unconscious knowledge. The more expertise you develop in a domain, the more your unconscious mind has learned about its patterns, and the more reliable your intuitions become. This is why experts can often make accurate snap judgments that they struggle to justify. The justification would require translating unconscious pattern recognition into conscious verbal reasoning, a translation that may not be possible without loss. Sometimes, the unconscious knows things that consciousness cannot articulate. Dreams may also represent unconscious processing at work. During sleep, particularly during REM sleep, when most vivid dreams occur, the brain is extraordinarily active, replaying experiences, consolidating memories, making connections between disparate pieces of information. Dreams often feel bizarre and illogical to the conscious mind, but they may reflect the unconscious mind's different logic, its way of organizing information through association, emotion, and imagery rather than through language and linear reasoning. Some researchers propose that dreams function as overnight therapy, processing emotional experiences in a safe context where the stress hormones that accompany waking emotion are suppressed. Others suggest dreams simulate threatening or challenging situations, allowing the brain to practice responses. Still others see dreams as the mental equivalent of a computer's defragmentation process, reorganizing information for efficient storage and retrieval. Whatever their function, dreams reveal a mind that continues working long after consciousness has withdrawn, sorting through the day's experiences, finding patterns, consolidating what matters. The phenomenon of sleep on it is real. When facing a difficult decision or creative problem, sleeping before deciding often leads to better outcomes. During sleep, the unconscious mind continues processing, freed from the constraints and biases of conscious thought. You may wake with clarity about a problem that seemed impossible the night before, or with a creative solution that emerges seemingly from nowhere. The unconscious has been working while consciousness rested. Automatic behaviors and habits also demonstrate unconscious intelligence. When you first learn to drive, every action requires conscious attention. Checking mirrors, judging distances, coordinating pedals and steering. All of this demands focused effort. But with practice, these actions become automatic, handled by unconscious systems, while consciousness is free to converse with passengers or think about the day ahead. This automation is not a loss of skill, but a gain in efficiency, transferring well-learned behaviors to unconscious systems that can execute them faster and more reliably than conscious control. Habits form through repetition in consistent contexts. When you perform the same action in the same situation repeatedly, your brain builds associations between context and response. Eventually, the context automatically triggers the behavior without requiring a conscious decision. This is why habits can be so difficult to break. You are not consciously choosing to perform them. They arise automatically from unconscious associations. Changing habits requires either changing the context or consciously interrupting the automatic sequence long enough to establish new associations. There are even cases of perception without awareness. Blind sight is a condition that occurs when the primary visual cortex is damaged, leaving people consciously blind in parts of their visual field. Yet if you ask them to guess where an object is located in their blind area, they guess correctly far more often than chance would predict. If you throw a ball at them, they may duck or catch it while insisting they saw nothing. Visual information is still reaching the brain through alternate pathways, guiding behavior even though it never enters conscious awareness. This demonstrates that consciousness and information processing can be separated. You can respond to information without experiencing it. Much of what you respond to throughout each day may never reach consciousness at all, processed and acted upon entirely by unconscious systems. The conscious mind may actually see only a small fraction of the information that guides behavior, experiencing itself as more in control than it truly is. Defense mechanisms, the psychological strategies that protect you from painful emotions and thoughts, also operate unconsciously. You may rationalize decisions to avoid confronting uncomfortable truths about your motivations. You may project your own unacceptable feelings onto others, seeing in them what you cannot acknowledge in yourself. You may repress memories too painful to consciously hold. These processes happen automatically, outside awareness, shaping your emotional experience and behavior in ways you rarely recognize. Cognitive biases, systematic errors in thinking and judgment, often reflect unconscious influences. Confirmation bias leads you to notice and remember information that confirms what you already believe while overlooking contradictory evidence. The availability heuristic causes you to overestimate the probability of events that easily come to mind, which is why vivid news stories distort your perception of risk. The fundamental attribution error makes you attribute others' behavior to their character, while attributing your own behavior to circumstances. These biases operate automatically, shaping judgment without conscious awareness or endorsement. The unconscious mind is also socially attuned, constantly reading and responding to social cues. When you have a conversation, your conscious mind focuses on the words and explicit meaning, but your unconscious processes tone, facial expressions, body language, timing, and context, integrating all of this into an intuitive sense of what the person really means and how they feel. You can often detect when someone is uncomfortable or lying, not because you consciously analyze specific indicators, but because your unconscious mind has detected incongruities between different channels of communication. Emotional responses often arise before conscious awareness. You may find your heart racing before you consciously identify a threat, or feel your mood shift before you understand why. The amygdala, central to emotional processing, receives sensory information directly, bypassing the slower conscious processing pathways. This allows rapid emotional responses to potential threats, which were crucial for survival in ancestral environments. The emotion comes first. The conscious understanding of what triggered it comes later, if at all. This temporal sequence creates an interesting situation. You feel an emotion, and then your conscious mind constructs an explanation for why you feel it. But these explanations are not always accurate. You might feel anxious because your blood sugar is low, but attribute the feeling to an upcoming meeting. You might feel irritated because you are tired, but convince yourself someone has wronged you. The emotion is real, but the story you tell yourself about its cause may be confabulation, a plausible narrative constructed after the fact. The relationship between conscious and unconscious mind is not hierarchical, but collaborative. Conscious thought excels at deliberate reasoning, verbal analysis, following explicit rules, and handling novel situations that require flexible response. The unconscious excels at rapid processing, pattern recognition, parallel integration of multiple sources of information, and exclamation keying well-learned skills. Both are necessary. Both contribute to every moment of experience and action, though their contributions may be invisible to consciousness itself. Understanding the power and pervasiveness of unconscious processing is humbling. It reveals that the conscious self, the narrator you experience as you, is not as in charge as it feels. Much of what you think, feel, and do arises from processes you do not control and often do not even notice. You are not a unitary agent consciously directing your life, but a collaboration between conscious and unconscious systems, each contributing in different ways to the experience of being you. Yet this is not a cause for concern, but for wonder. The unconscious mind is not an enemy or a source of chaos, but an ally, the result of millions of years of evolution, exquisitely adapted to the task of keeping you alive, helping you navigate complexity, learning from experience without requiring explicit instruction. It works tirelessly, processing information, detecting patterns, guiding you through the world with a competence that conscious thought could never match. As you rest here now, your unconscious mind continues its work. It breathes for you, keeps your heart beating, maintains the delicate balance of systems that sustains life. It processes the information you have taken in, consolidating what matters, discarding what does not, preparing insights that may emerge tomorrow or next week, seemingly from nowhere. It is always with you, always working, the silent partner in every experience, the invisible foundation on which the small island of consciousness rests. From this unconscious foundation, emotions arise, coloring every moment of experience. They wash over you like weather, sometimes gentle and warming, sometimes fierce and overwhelming. You wake with a sense of contentment for no clear reason, or find yourself irritated by small things when larger stresses weigh upon you. Emotions seem to come from somewhere beyond rational control, arriving unbidden, shifting your entire experience of the world. And this is precisely what they are designed to do. Emotions are ancient survival systems, older than language, older than conscious thought, that prepare your body and mind to respond to challenges and opportunities. At the center of emotional processing lies a small, almond-shaped structure deep within your brain called the amygdala. It receives sensory information before your conscious mind does, scanning constantly for anything that might signal danger or reward. When it detects a potential threat, a snake-like shape in the grass, a sudden movement in your peripheral vision, an angry expression on a face, it triggers a cascade of responses throughout your body before you consciously register what you have seen. Your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, stress hormones flood your system. Your attention narrows to focus on the threat. All of this happens in milliseconds, faster than thought. This rapid response system evolved because speed matters in life or death situations. An ancestor who paused to consciously deliberate whether that rustling in the bushes was dangerous would not survive as long as one whose body automatically prepared to fight or flee. The conscious mind is too slow for immediate survival, so emotions bypass deliberation, preparing you to act before you fully understand why. You jump at a sudden noise, your body reacting before your mind recognizes it was only a door closing. The startled response, the racing heart, these are not errors but features, the price of a system optimized for keeping you alive. Research has identified a small set of basic emotions that appear to be universal across human cultures. No matter where people live, what language they speak, or what their customs are, they recognize and express happiness, sadness, fear, anger, surprise, and disgust through remarkably similar facial expressions. When Paul Ekman showed photographs of faces to people in remote Papua New Guinea villages who had never been exposed to Western culture, they identified the emotions correctly. When he showed photographs of Papua New Guineans to Westerners, they too recognized the expressions. This universality suggests these emotions and their expressions are not learned but innate, part of our evolutionary inheritance. Each of these basic emotions serves a function. Fear prepares you to escape danger, narrowing attention to the threat, increasing heart rate and respiration to fuel action. Anger prepares you to fight, to defend resources or loved ones, flooding the body with energy and focusing attention on the source of transgression. Disgust protects you from contamination, making you recoil from spoiled food, bodily waste, or disease. Sadness signals loss and elicits support from others while also causing you to withdraw and conserve energy. Happiness signals safety and success, encouraging you to continue current behaviors and strengthening social bonds. Surprise resets your attention, interrupting ongoing processing to orient towards something unexpected. But emotions do not arise solely from the brain sending signals to the body. The relationship is bidirectional. Your body's state profoundly influences your emotional experience, an insight captured in the James Lang theory of emotion proposed over a century ago. William James suggested that we do not run because we are afraid. We are afraid because we run. The bodily changes come first, and our interpretation of those changes creates the feeling. While this theory was initially controversial, modern research has confirmed that bodily states do indeed shape emotional experience. When you smile, even if you force the expression artificially, you tend to feel slightly happier. The facial feedback hypothesis suggests that the muscles of your face send signals back to your brain that influence mood. Similarly, standing in an expansive, confident posture can make you feel more powerful, while slouching can increase feelings of helplessness. Your breathing pattern affects your emotional state. Rapid, shallow breathing can induce anxiety, while slow, deep breathing promotes calm. The state of your body is not just a result of emotion, but a cause of it. This insight led to the two-factor theory of emotion proposed by Stanley Schachter and Jerome Singer. They suggested that emotion requires both physiological arousal and a cognitive interpretation of that arousal. You feel your heart racing, your breathing quickens, your muscles tense, but these sensations are ambiguous. They could signal fear, excitement, anger, or even attraction. Your mind labels the arousal based on context, past experience, and the situation you find yourself in. The same physiological state can be experienced as different emotions depending on how you interpret it. This is why emotions can be surprisingly fluid. The physical arousal from exercise can be misattributed as romantic attraction if you encounter someone appealing while your heart is racing. The tension in your body from sitting too long can be interpreted as anxiety if you happen to think about something worrying. Your emotional experience emerges from the interaction between bodily sensations and cognitive interpretation, neither alone determining what you feel. Emotions are also profoundly contagious. When you see someone smile, you unconsciously smile slightly in response, and that facial movement influences your own mood. Mirror neurons fire when you observe another's emotional expression, creating a simulation of that emotion in your own neural systems. This is the biological basis of empathy, your capacity to feel what others feel. You quite literally resonate with the emotional states of those around you, your nervous system automatically synchronizing with theirs. This emotional contagion happens below conscious awareness. In studies where researchers measured facial muscle activity too subtle to see, people showed matching expressions within milliseconds of seeing an emotional face. You absorb the moods of those you spend time with, which is why being around anxious people can make you anxious. Why laughter spreads through groups. Why one person's bad mood can darken an entire room. Your emotional state is not isolated within you, but is constantly influenced by the emotional atmosphere around you. The ability to regulate emotion, to modulate its intensity and duration, develops gradually across childhood and varies considerably among adults. Some people ride emotional waves more intensely than others, their feelings arising quickly and powerfully. Others experience emotions more mildly, with less dramatic shifts in state. Neither pattern is inherently better. Intense emotions provide clear signals and strong motivation, but can be overwhelming. Milder emotions are easier to manage, but provide less information and less motivational force. Emotional regulation strategies include attention deployment, directing your focus toward or away from emotional triggers. If you feel anxious about an upcoming event, you can distract yourself with other activities. Cognitive reappraisal involves changing how you think about a situation to change how you feel about it. Viewing a stressful situation as a challenge rather than a threat can shift anxiety toward excitement. Expressive suppression means inhibiting the outward signs of emotion, keeping a neutral face even when feeling strong emotions internally. This can be useful in professional contexts, but tends to increase physiological stress and can impair memory. Research consistently shows that cognitive reappraisal, changing your interpretation of events, is generally the most effective long-term strategy for emotional regulation. It addresses emotions at their source rather than simply controlling their expression. But all regulation strategies have their place. The key is flexibility, the ability to deploy different strategies depending on context and goals. Your current emotional state profoundly influences cognition. Mood affects what you attend to, what you remember, how you interpret ambiguous information, even how you solve problems. When you are happy, you tend to think more broadly and creatively, making novel associations, considering possibilities. Positive emotions broaden your attention and cognitive scope, which makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. When things are going well, when you are safe and resourced, you can afford to explore, to play, to consider new ideas. This is when learning and growth happen most easily. Negative emotions, in contrast, narrow attention and focus thinking. When you are anxious or afraid, your attention tunnels toward potential threats. You become more detail-oriented, more analytical, more critical. This, too, makes evolutionary sense. When danger threatens, you cannot afford to be creative and exploratory. You need to focus on the problem at hand, to think carefully about immediate risks, to avoid mistakes. Negative emotions prioritize accuracy over speed, caution over boldness. This means your emotional state shapes not just how you feel, but how you think. A problem that seems unsolvable when you are anxious might yield to creative insight when you are relaxed and happy. A person who seems suspicious when you are in a negative mood might seem trustworthy when you are feeling positive. Your emotions color your perceptions, your memories, your judgments, creating different experiential worlds depending on your feeling state. Memory is especially intertwined with emotion. Emotional events are remembered more vividly and durably than neutral events. The amygdala modulates memory consolidation in the hippocampus, essentially tagging emotional experiences as important. This is adaptive. The situations that evoked strong emotions, whether positive or negative, are likely to be significant for survival and thus worth remembering. But this emotional enhancement of memory means your past is not an objective record, but a collection of emotional highlights, the moments that moved you most deeply. Your current mood also affects what you remember. When you are sad, sad memories become more accessible, a phenomenon called mood congruent memory. This can create a feedback loop where sadness triggers sad memories, which intensify sadness, which triggers more sad memories. Breaking this loop often requires deliberately shifting attention to different memories or changing activity patterns to shift mood, interrupting the cycle. Emotions also play a crucial role in decision making. For decades, Western philosophy and psychology assumed that good decisions required pure reason, that emotions were impediments to clear thinking. But neuroscientist Antonio Damasio's work with patients who had damage to emotional processing regions revealed something surprising. These patients could reason abstractly, but they became paralyzed by simple decisions, unable to choose what to eat or what to wear. Without emotional input, without the gut feeling that one option was better than another, they could generate options and analyze them logically, but could not commit to a choice. This led Damasio to propose the somatic marker hypothesis. As you navigate life, you learn associations between situations, actions, and outcomes. When you consider a decision, your body generates subtle emotional responses, somatic markers, based on past experience. These feelings guide you toward options associated with positive outcomes and away from those associated with negative ones. The feelings are not infallible, but they provide rapid evaluations based on accumulated experience, allowing you to navigate complex decisions that would overwhelm purely logical analysis. Emotions, then, are not opposed to rationality, but are essential to it. Good judgment requires both emotional wisdom and logical analysis, each contributing necessary information. Pure emotion, without reflection, can lead you astray, as when fear prevents you from taking necessary risks or anger leads to destructive actions. But pure logic, without emotional input, leaves you unable to evaluate what matters, what you care about, what is worth pursuing. The landscape of emotion is where human experience becomes most vivid, most meaningful, most fully alive. Joy lifts you out of yourself, connecting you to the world with openness and delight. Sorrow pulls you inward, marking what mattered, honoring what has been lost. Fear keeps you vigilant, protective of what you cherish. Anger defends boundaries, signals injustice, motivates change. Even emotions that feel uncomfortable serve purposes, carry information, shape your relationship to the world in ways that ultimately serve survival and well-being. Understanding emotions as functional systems rather than random upheavals allows a different relationship with them. They are not enemies to be suppressed, but messengers to be heard. They arise from the deepest parts of your evolutionary history, connecting you to the long lineage of living beings who felt fear, joy, sadness, and love long before humans walked the earth. Your emotions are powerful and wise in their own way, guiding you through a complex world with knowledge that predates language and logic. And these emotions do not exist in isolation. They arise in relationships, in the connections between people, in the intricate social world that shapes human life from birth to death. You are not a solitary mind observing the world from behind your eyes. You are a fundamentally social being, shaped by others from your first breath, dependent on connection for survival and well-being. Your very sense of self constructed through relationships. The human brain is, in the deepest sense, a social organ, evolved to navigate the complex landscape of cooperation, competition, status, and belonging that defines our species. Consider how different human infants are from the young of most other species. A baby deer can walk within hours of birth. A sea turtle hatchling navigates to the ocean alone, never seeing its mother. But a human infant is helpless for years, requiring constant care, protection, and teaching to survive. This extended dependence is not a design flaw, but a feature. It allows the human brain to remain plastic during development, shaped by the specific social and physical environment into which the child is born. You learn not just practical skills, but entire ways of being human. Culturally specific patterns of thought, emotion, and behavior transmitted through years of immersion in a social world. From the earliest moments of life, infants are exquisitely attuned to social information. Newborns, only hours old, prefer to look at faces over other visual stimuli. They can distinguish their mother's voice from a stranger's voice. Within days, they begin imitating facial expressions, sticking out their tongue when an adult does, furrowing their brow, opening their mouth. This imitation is not conscious, but automatic, revealing that mirror neuron systems are active from birth, connecting your actions and perceptions to the actions and perceptions of others. As children develop, they become increasingly sophisticated social learners. By around 9 months, they develop joint attention, the ability to follow another's gaze and share focus on an object. This seemingly simple capacity is foundational for language learning and cultural transmission. When a parent points at something and names it, the child must understand that the parent intends them to look at that thing, that the word connects to the object of shared attention. Without this understanding of shared intentionality, language learning would be nearly impossible. Around age 4, most children pass the false belief test, demonstrating theory of mind, the understanding that others have minds with beliefs, desires, and knowledge that may differ from one's own. In the classic version, children hear a story about Sally, who puts a marble in a basket and leaves the room. While Sally is gone, another character, Anne, moves the marble to a box. Children are asked where Sally will look for the marble when she returns. 3-year-olds typically say the box, where the marble actually is. But 4-year-olds say the basket, understanding that Sally believes the marble is still there because she did not see it moved. This marks a crucial insight. Other people have their own perspectives on reality, which may differ from yours. Theory of mind allows you to predict and interpret behavior by considering mental states. You understand that someone searching for their keys believes the keys are where they are looking, even if you can see the keys elsewhere. You understand that someone might say something they do not believe in order to deceive or protect. You grasp that two people can have different preferences, different knowledge, different goals. Without this capacity, social life would be incomprehensible, reduced to stimulus and response with no understanding of the intentions and beliefs that drive behavior. But the theory of mind is not perfect. You systematically underestimate how different other people's inner experiences are from your own, a bias called the false consensus effect. You assume others see the world as you do, like what you like, believe what you believe. When you know something, it becomes hard to imagine not knowing it, a curse of knowledge that makes teaching difficult. When something seems obvious to you, you struggle to understand how others could see it differently. Your perspective feels like reality itself, rather than one viewpoint among many. You also unconsciously mimic those around you in subtle ways. When you converse with someone, you gradually synchronize your speech patterns, adopting similar rhythms, accents, and word choices. You mirror their posture and gestures, often matching their position moments after they shift. This mimicry happens automatically, below awareness, and serves important social functions. It builds rapport, creates a sense of connection, signals that you are alike. People who are mimicked tend to like the mimicker more, even when the mimicry is too subtle to consciously notice. This phenomenon, called the chameleon effect, reveals how permeable the boundaries between self and other really are. You do not maintain a completely separate identity in social interactions, but unconsciously adapt yourself to resonate with those around you. The self you are with one person differs slightly from the self you are with another, not because you are being false, but because different relationships evoke different aspects of your personality, different ways of speaking and moving and being. The need for social connection is not a preference, but a fundamental requirement for well-being, as essential as food or sleep. Studies of loneliness reveal that chronic social isolation affects health as severely as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Lonely people have higher rates of cardiovascular disease, impaired immune function, increased inflammation, and earlier mortality. The body treats social isolation as a threat, triggering stress responses that, over time, damage health. You are literally wired for connection, and a lack of it creates physiological dysregulation. The pain of social rejection activates the same neural regions as physical pain. When people are excluded from a group in laboratory experiments, when they are left out of a ball-tossing game or rejected by potential romantic partners, brain imaging shows activation in the anterior cingulate cortex and insula, regions associated with the distressing component of physical pain. The language we use for rejection, "It hurts," "I am wounded," "She broke my heart," is not merely metaphorical. Social pain and physical pain share neural circuitry because both signal threats to survival. For our ancestors, exclusion from the group could mean death. Conversely, social support is remarkably protective. People with strong social networks recover from illness more quickly, experience less severe symptoms, and live longer. The presence of supportive others literally buffers against stress. When you face a challenge alone, your body mounts a larger stress response than when you face the same challenge with a friend present. Simply holding the hand of someone you trust reduces activity in threat-related brain regions and diminishes the experience of pain. Connection is medicine, soothing the nervous system, regulating emotion, providing resilience against life's difficulties. But social influence cuts both ways. Groups can bring out the best in people, inspiring cooperation, generosity, and courage. But they can also bring out the worst, enabling cruelty, conformity, and diffusion of responsibility. The infamous Ash conformity experiments demonstrated how readily people conform to group opinion even when it contradicts their own perception. Participants were asked to judge which of three lines matched a standard line in length, an easy task. But when Confederates deliberately gave wrong answers, about 75% of participants conformed at least once, agreeing with the obviously incorrect group answer rather than trusting their own eyes. Conformity is not always bad. It allows social coordination, enables the transmission of cultural knowledge, and helps individuals learn from the collective wisdom of groups. If everyone in your village avoids a particular plant, conforming to this norm without understanding the reason could save your life. But conformity can also lead you to doubt your own judgment, to go along with actions you know are wrong, to suppress your authentic responses in favor of fitting in. The bystander effect shows how the presence of others can inhibit helping behavior. When someone needs assistance, a lone individual will often help, but as the number of bystanders increases, the likelihood that any particular person will help decreases. Responsibility diffuses across the group. Each person assumes someone else will act or looks to others to determine whether the situation is truly an emergency. If everyone is looking around uncertainly, waiting for cues, no one acts. This is not because people become cruel in groups, but because social processes override individual impulses to help. The Milgram obedience experiments revealed how powerfully authority influences behavior. Participants were instructed by an experimenter to deliver what they believed were increasingly painful electric shocks to another person as punishment for wrong answers. Despite hearing screams and pleas to stop, despite their own distress at what they were doing, about 65% of participants continued to the maximum shock level when the authority figure insisted the experiment must continue. They were not sadistic, but ordinary people following orders, demonstrating how social roles and authority can override individual moral judgment. These classic studies are disturbing because they reveal how fragile individual judgment can be in social contexts. You like to believe you would resist conformity, would help someone in need, would refuse to harm another person. And perhaps you would. But the research suggests most people underestimate how powerfully situations and social pressures shape behavior. You are not as autonomous, not as guided by internal values as you feel you are. Social context matters immensely. Social comparison is another fundamental aspect of social cognition. You constantly evaluate yourself relative to others, judging your abilities, accomplishments, and worth by comparison. When you compare upward to those doing better, you may feel inspired or inadequate, depending on whether you see their success as attainable. When you compare downward to those doing worse, you may feel grateful or superior. These comparisons shape self-esteem, motivation, and emotion, yet they are often based on incomplete and distorted information about others' lives. In the age of social media, social comparison has intensified. You see curated highlights from dozens or hundreds of connections, comparing your behind the scenes reality to their polished presentations. This asymmetry breeds dissatisfaction. Research consistently shows that heavy social media use correlates with increased anxiety, depression, and feelings of inadequacy, particularly among young people. The comparison is not fair. You are comparing your internal experience, including all your doubts and struggles, to others' external presentations. But the emotional impact is real nonetheless. Status hierarchies emerge spontaneously in human groups, as they do in other social primates. Within minutes of strangers meeting, patterns of deference and dominance begin to form. Some people speak more, others listen. Some make decisions, others follow. These hierarchies are not rigidly determined by individual traits, but emerge from interactions shaped by context, culture, and the specific composition of the group. The same person might be high status in one group and low status in another. Your position in status hierarchies affects your psychology and physiology. Higher status is associated with better health outcomes, greater life expectancy, and lower stress hormones, even when controlling for income and access to resources. The subjective experience of where you stand relative to others matters profoundly. Feeling respected, valued, and influential contributes to well-being. Feeling disrespected, overlooked, and powerless creates chronic stress. Yet despite the complexity and occasional darkness of social life, humans display remarkable pro-social tendencies. Even very young children, before significant socialization, help others spontaneously, share resources, and show concern for those in distress. Cooperation and fairness appear to be part of our evolved psychology, not just imposed by culture. Experiments across diverse cultures find that people punish unfairness even at personal cost, that they cooperate in dilemmas where self-interest would dictate defection, that they feel guilt and shame when they violate social norms. This pro-social nature coexists with tribalism, the tendency to favor your own group over others. You automatically categorize people as in-group or out-group based on minimal cues. The same university, the same sports team, even arbitrary assignments in experiments. You trust in-group members more, help them more readily, remember them more positively. Out-group members are viewed with more suspicion, their failings attributed to character, while their successes are attributed to luck or circumstance. These biases can be reduced, but not eliminated. Contact between groups, particularly cooperative contact, where people work toward shared goals, decreases prejudice. Perspective-taking exercises that encourage you to imagine others' experiences increase empathy across group lines. But the basic tendency to think in terms of us and them appears deeply rooted, likely because group cohesion and loyalty were crucial for survival in ancestral environments where between-group competition was common. The social brain is constantly active, constantly processing information about relationships, status, cooperation, and belonging. When your mind wanders and you are not focused on an external task, the default mode network activates, and much of your spontaneous thought involves social content. You replay conversations, imagine future interactions, think about what others think of you, consider social obligations and connections. Your brain, left to its own devices, thinks about people. This makes sense because navigating social relationships was perhaps the primary evolutionary pressure that drove the expansion of the human brain. Individual intelligence is useful, but social intelligence, the ability to cooperate, compete, predict others' behavior, build alliances, teach and learn from others, this may have been the key to human success. Your large brain exists not primarily to solve abstract problems, but to navigate the endlessly complex social world in which you are embedded. Yet the brain is not fixed. For most of the 20th century, neuroscientists believed the adult brain was essentially static, its structure determined by genetics and early development, its neurons unable to regenerate or reorganize. The brain you had by early adulthood was the brain you would keep, gradually declining but fundamentally unchangeable. This view cast a shadow over anyone who suffered a brain injury or wished to develop new capacities later in life. But this view was wrong. The brain changes constantly throughout life, reshaping itself in response to experience, learning, injury, and even thought itself. This capacity for change is called neuroplasticity, and it is one of the most hopeful discoveries in all of neuroscience. Every experience you have, every skill you learn, every thought you think repeatedly, these create physical changes in your brain. Neurons that fire together wire together, as the saying goes. When you practice something, the neural pathways involved in that activity strengthen. The connections between neurons, the synapses where communication occurs, become more efficient. The myelin sheath that insulates neural fibers thickens, allowing signals to travel faster. If you practice enough, entire regions of your brain can grow larger, reorganizing to dedicate more neural real estate to skills you use frequently. Perhaps the most famous demonstration of this comes from studying London taxi drivers. To earn their license, these drivers must pass the knowledge, a grueling test that requires memorizing the layout of London's 25,000 streets and thousands of landmarks. This takes years of study. Brain imaging studies found that London taxi drivers have significantly larger hippocampi, the brain structure crucial for spatial memory and navigation, compared to non-taxi drivers. The longer someone had been driving a taxi, the larger their hippocampus. Learning to navigate London's complex street network had literally changed the physical structure of their brains. Musicians show similar plastic changes. Professional musicians have enlarged auditory cortices and motor cortices compared to non-musicians, particularly in regions corresponding to the hand they use for their instrument. Violinists show expansion in the area representing the fingers of the left hand, which performs the intricate finger work, but not the right hand, which holds the bow. The brain allocates space based on use, growing regions that are exercised while allowing unused areas to shrink. Your brain's structure, at any moment, reflects the life you have lived, the skills you have practiced, the experiences you have accumulated. Even reading reorganizes the brain. Humans have been reading for only a few thousand years, far too short a time for evolution to have created dedicated reading regions. Instead, learning to read recruits and repurposes neural circuits originally evolved for other functions, primarily visual object recognition and language processing. These regions literally change structure in children as they learn to read, creating the visual word form area that responds specifically to written letters and words. Adults who learn to read later in life show the same reorganization, proof that plasticity continues throughout the lifespan. The discovery of adult neurogenesis, the birth of new neurons in the adult brain, further revolutionized understanding of brain plasticity. For decades, the absence of new neurons in adults was considered an established fact. But in the 1980s, researchers definitively demonstrated that the human hippocampus continues producing new neurons throughout life. These new neurons integrate into existing circuits and appear to play important roles in learning and memory, particularly in distinguishing similar memories from each other. The rate of neurogenesis is influenced by behavior and environment. Physical exercise, particularly aerobic exercise, increases the birth of new neurons. Learning new things promotes their survival and integration. Chronic stress and depression decrease neurogenesis. While the functional significance of adult neurogenesis is still being studied, its mere existence overturned fundamental assumptions about the fixed nature of the brain. Neuroplasticity operates throughout development, but is especially pronounced during critical periods, windows of heightened plasticity when particular systems are especially sensitive to experience. The visual system has a critical period in early childhood when visual input is necessary for normal development. Children born with cataracts that block vision must have them removed early, or the visual cortex will reorganize to process other types of information, and normal vision will never develop, even after the cataracts are removed. The input must arrive during the critical period for the system to wire itself properly. Language acquisition also has critical periods. Children exposed to language from birth acquire it effortlessly, mastering complex grammar without explicit instruction. The ease of language learning gradually declines through childhood and adolescence. Adults can learn new languages, but it requires much more effort and rarely results in the effortless, native-like fluency that characterizes learning during the critical period. The brain's plasticity for language is highest early in life, then gradually decreases, though it never disappears entirely. But while critical periods exist, plasticity continues throughout life. The adult brain is not as flexible as the infant brain, but it can still change dramatically. Adults who lose their sight show reorganization of visual cortex, which begins responding to touch and sound. People who lose limbs experience reorganization of the motor and sensory cortices, with adjacent body regions expanding into the area that formerly represented the missing limb. This can create phantom sensations, where touching one part of the body produces feelings in the missing limb because the brain regions now overlap. These changes can occur remarkably quickly. After just 5 days of wearing a blindfold continuously, participants in experiments show that their visual cortex begins responding to touch, and they perform better on tactile discrimination tasks. When the blindfold is removed, the visual cortex returns to processing vision within hours. The brain constantly adjusts its processing based on available input, reallocating resources dynamically to match current demands. Meditation provides a powerful example of how mental training can induce plastic changes. Long-term meditators show thickening in brain regions associated with attention, interoception, and sensory processing. They show increased gray matter density in the hippocampus and regions involved in emotional regulation. Some of these changes correlate with hours of practice, suggesting that meditation, like any skill, physically changes the brain through repeated practice. Even short-term meditation training can produce measurable changes. Studies of people who complete an 8-week mindfulness meditation program show increased gray matter concentration in regions involved in learning, memory, emotion regulation, and perspective taking. These are not lifelong meditators, but ordinary people who practiced for roughly 30 minutes per day for 2 months. The brain responds to mental training just as muscles respond to physical training, strengthening the systems that are exercised. Recovery from brain injury demonstrates plasticity's healing potential. When part of the brain is damaged by stroke or trauma, remaining regions can sometimes take over lost functions. This recovery is partial and incomplete, particularly for severe injuries, but the fact that it happens at all reveals the brain's adaptive capacity. Rehabilitation after brain injury works by encouraging this plastic reorganization, using intensive practice of impaired functions to stimulate surviving neurons to form new connections that compensate for damaged areas. Young brains recover better from injury than older brains, reflecting their greater plasticity. Children who have an entire hemisphere removed, a radical surgery sometimes necessary for severe epilepsy, can recover remarkably well. The remaining hemisphere takes over functions typically performed by the removed side, allowing relatively normal development. This would be impossible in an adult, whose brain is less plastic and more specialized. The difference illustrates how plasticity decreases with age, even as it never disappears entirely. The concept of a growth mindset, developed by psychologist Carol Dweck, connects directly to neuroplasticity. People with a growth mindset believe abilities can be developed through effort and learning. Those with a fixed mindset believe abilities are innate and unchangeable. These beliefs profoundly affect motivation and achievement. Students with growth mindsets persist through difficulty, viewing challenges as opportunities to grow. Those with fixed mindsets give up more easily, viewing difficulty as evidence that they lack ability. Teaching people about neuroplasticity can shift mindsets. When students learn that their brains change in response to effort, that struggling with difficult material literally makes them smarter by strengthening neural connections, they become more willing to persist through challenges. Understanding plasticity transforms struggle from a sign of inadequacy into a mechanism of growth. Your brain is not a fixed entity that limits your potential, but a dynamic system that responds to how you use it. Habits form through plastic changes. When you repeat an action in a consistent context, the neural pathways involved in that action strengthen. Eventually, the context itself can trigger the action automatically, without conscious intention. This is habit formation, the transfer of control from conscious decision-making systems to automatic, unconscious systems. The behavior becomes encoded in the basal ganglia, brain structures involved in procedural learning and habit. Breaking habits requires forming new neural pathways to compete with existing ones. This is difficult because the old pathways remain, ready to be reactivated. This is why broken habits can return so easily, particularly under stress or in contexts strongly associated with the old behavior. But with consistent effort, new pathways can become strong enough to dominate, effectively overriding the old habit even though the neural traces of it persist. Cognitive reserve is a concept that emerges from understanding plasticity. Throughout life, engaging in mentally stimulating activities, education, learning new skills, maintaining social connections, these build cognitive reserve by creating richer, more densely connected neural networks. This reserve provides protection against cognitive decline in aging and dementia. Two people with the same amount of brain pathology may show very different levels of impairment depending on their cognitive reserve. The person with greater reserve can compensate for damage by recruiting alternate neural pathways, maintaining function longer despite the underlying disease. This suggests that how you live shapes your brain's resilience. Regular cognitive challenges, continued learning, new experiences, these build the neural infrastructure that can buffer against age-related decline. The brain is use it or lose it. Regions and connections that are exercised remain strong. Those that are neglected atrophy. Staying mentally active throughout life is not just about maintaining current function, but about building reserves for the future. Physical exercise benefits the brain as powerfully as mental exercise, perhaps more so. Aerobic exercise increases blood flow to the brain, promotes the growth of new neurons, stimulates the release of growth factors that support neural health, and appears to protect against cognitive decline. Older adults who exercise regularly maintain brain volume better than sedentary individuals. They perform better on cognitive tests, particularly on tasks involving executive function and memory. Exercise may be the single most effective intervention for maintaining brain health across the lifespan. The molecular mechanisms of plasticity involve changes at multiple levels. At the synapse, learning strengthens some connections and weakens others through processes called long-term potentiation and long-term depression. Repeatedly stimulating a connection makes it more efficient, allowing the receiving neuron to fire more readily in response to signals from the sending neuron. The reverse process weakens connections that are rarely used. These changes can happen rapidly and provide the cellular basis for learning and memory. At a larger scale, structural changes occur. Neurons grow new dendritic spines, the tiny protrusions where synapses form. They extend new branches, reaching out to form connections with additional neurons. The myelin coating around axons thickens, speeding signal transmission. In some cases, entirely new neurons are born and integrate into existing circuits. All of these changes are happening constantly, invisibly reshaping the brain in response to experience. Genes and environment interact in creating the brain. Your genetic inheritance provides the basic blueprint and constraints, but experience determines how that blueprint is realized. Even identical twins with the same DNA develop distinct personalities, preferences, and abilities because their experiences differ, shaping their brains differently. Nature provides the raw materials and general architecture, but nurture sculpts the details. You are not determined by your genes, but by the interaction between genetic potential and lived experience. This knowledge is liberating. You are not trapped by your current abilities or limitations. The brain you have today is not the brain you must have tomorrow. Every day offers opportunities for growth and change, for strengthening desired patterns and weakening unwanted ones. The person you are is not fixed, but is a work in progress, continually shaped by your choices, experiences, and practices. Change is not only possible but inevitable. The question is not whether your brain will change, but in what direction, toward what end. As you rest here, your brain continues its plastic transformation. The day's experiences are being consolidated, integrated into existing knowledge, strengthening some connections while allowing others to weaken. Sleep itself is a period of intense plasticity when the brain reorganizes and optimizes, when learning is stabilized and enhanced. Tomorrow, you will wake changed, your brain slightly different than it was today, shaped by everything you experienced, thought, and felt. And this capacity for change extends beyond learning and skill to healing and resilience, to the remarkable ability of the mind to adapt, to transform, to find new ways forward, even after the deepest wounds. The brain you carry is not a machine running fixed programs, but a living system, forever responding, forever becoming, shaped by every experience, every relationship, every moment of attention you bring to your own inner life. All of this complexity, all of these systems we have explored tonight: memory and perception, emotion and social connection, unconscious processes and conscious awareness. All of it arises from the electrochemical activity of billions of neurons. Cells speaking to cells in patterns of extraordinary intricacy, creating the felt experience of being someone, of having a past and imagining a future, of caring about things, of mattering to others and being mattered to in return. The mind studying itself discovers not answers that close inquiry, but questions that open wonder. You are both the observer and the observed, the one who thinks and the thoughts themselves, the one who feels emotions and the emotions that wash through awareness. Psychology reveals this strange loop, this capacity of mind to reflect on itself, to wonder about its own nature, to study the very processes that allow study to occur. And in this reflection lies both humility and possibility. Humility because you are not as in control, not as rational, not as unified as you feel. Possibility because you are not fixed, not determined, not limited to who you have been. The invisible world within you is vast beyond measure. Beneath every conscious moment lies an ocean of processing, of memory and anticipation, of emotion and intuition, of automatic behaviors and learned patterns, all working together to create the seamless experience of being you. And this you is forever changing, forever shaped by attention and experience, by the people you love and the challenges you face, by every choice you make about where to direct your limited awareness. As sleep approaches, let these ideas settle. Let the complexity fade into simplicity. Let the questions dissolve into the quiet certainty of breath, of heartbeat, of the body's ancient rhythms calling you toward rest. You have wandered far tonight through the landscape of mind, and now it is time to return to the simplest truth. You are here, alive, conscious, part of the great mystery of awareness itself. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the fascinating terrain of psychology. If these explorations brought you insight or peace, please consider liking this video, subscribing to The Gentle Scientist, or sharing your thoughts below. Your support helps others discover these quiet moments of learning and rest. For now, let your eyes grow heavy. Let your thoughts drift like clouds across an evening sky. Let the day's concerns fall away into darkness. Your mind has done its work. Your brain will continue its quiet labor through the night, organizing, consolidating, preparing you for tomorrow. Sleep well. May your rest be deep and your dreams be gentle. And may you wake refreshed, carrying with you some small understanding of the beautiful, mysterious system that is your own mind. Good night.